What's happening, everybody? Welcome into a brand new episode of Crossed Up. Anthony Sanfilippo's here. I'm Bob Wankel. Early on a Tuesday morning, Phillies in the midst of a 6-game winning streak, 4-game sweep of the San Francisco Giants, 10 straight wins at home. It's their best start since the 1993 season, 36 games in. Anthony, man, we tried. We didn't record yesterday because we're like, how many times in a row can we just come on here and be positive and talk about how good the Phillies are? We got to let this thing dry out for at least another day. Maybe a young kid, Lehigh product, Scranton kid comes in and shuts the Phillies down, and we'll have something to complain about. We tried. They didn't do it. Here we are. Let the good times roll, man.
Just shut it down, Bob. We don't need to do this anymore, right?
The Phillies are good. No, it's so weird from a programming perspective because, can you think of a time, and the answer is clearly no, where you do show after show after show, and you're like, man, this is really going well.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'll tell you how this is how you know that it's going really well. Even in the post-game live, right? The overreaction group of Barkan and Ricky Bo and all those guys, even after the game last night, Ricky Bo had to admit, he says, Michael, we're not just dealing with a good team here. This is a very, very good team. You don't go 25-11 to start the season unless you're a very, very good team.
Or the 95 Phillies.
Well, yeah, that was an interesting. I don't know. You probably don't remember.
I remember that team a little bit. Greg Jeffries. Yeah, I remember the 95 team a little bit because that was the year after they came back from the strike, and I recall that team a little.
They had a bunch of guys get hurt early in that year too. That kind of Jeffries was trying to carry the team after a while. They got off to that great start, and then all of a sudden injury after injury after injury after injury, and it was nothing left. And
that team actually, I was looking at them yesterday because I was like, well, what did they do in that 36 game? And that's when I realized, the Phillies are actually now better than the 95 team, but they're not as good yet as the 93 team in terms of pacing.
Right.
That 95 team actually got to 34-17, so they were able to carry on for a couple more weeks.
Yeah.
And then it fell apart, and it fell apart pretty quickly too.
Yeah, for sure. And look, you never assume anything, right? But there's just something about this team. And I don't know, you were down there yesterday, and I don't know if you get that feeling when you walk into that clubhouse and you talk to these guys, and you just get the feeling that it's not like an overconfidence, but it's an uber confidence that this is like a revenge tour. We're just going to go out there and we're going to crush everybody as much as best we can, and we're just going to keep going until we get to our ultimate goal at the end of the line, at the end of the road, and that's kind of their mentality going in, game out. They're not taking nights off.
Yeah, I don't want to say that when you have the Phillies' attention that you're in trouble. Look out. They didn't win the World Series in each of the last 2 years. They didn't do it, so I'm not going to sit here and anoint these guys as champions, but. You saw it in 22. It's like, hey, it's time to go now. And they did. And in 23, when it was time to go and they put themselves in a little bit of a hole, they dug themselves out of it. And then they showed the Braves what was up again. And this year, I think that they kind of feel that way right from the start. I think that you have the Phillies' attention right now. And, Rob was asked after the game by Matt Gelb, you try when things aren't going well to keep these guys even keel, you want to kind of be steady, but what happens when they're playing so well? How do you sort of guard against that complacency? And Rob's like, you just have to stress to them to do their job. But he said, with this group of guys, I don't worry about that. And I really think that that's what this comes down to. I think that these guys understand the way that the regular seasons went each of the last 2 seasons. I think they're tired of hearing about it. I think they're tired of hearing about the slow starts. And certainly they've cleared that hurdle. But this, to me, isn't a team that's just going to be satisfied with getting to where they're at right now and sort of coasting the rest of the way. I think they want to win this division. I think that they believe they can win this division. And they're playing with a lot of confidence and energy right now. And it's very, very clear that there is a certain amount of, and I hate to use the word, but there's a certain amount of swagger going on with this team. And they're really feeding off of one another right now.
Yeah, and here's the other thing, Bob. and I'm not trying to say that they don't have any areas that they can improve, but because every team always does, right? There's no perfect team. Every team's always going to have areas they can improve. But if you take things collective, like individually, and look at it and say, how good are they here? How good are they here? How good are they here? They're very good in every one of those areas collectively. And so then when you put all that together, you're going to be hard pressed to find another team in the sport, maybe one or two, but for the most part, you're going to be hard pressed to find a team that is in the same situation as the Phillies are from that perspective. Whether you look at it as I think they have the best starting pitching in the game, right? Okay, so that they have that. When you look at their lineup and how they slug, they're amongst the better teams in baseball. When you look at their bullpen, it's not the best right now, but it's pretty good, right? Especially when you look at guys like Hoffman and Strahm, who we got to talk about, because Strahm, I think he gave up 2 runs in his first game of the season and hasn't given up a run since.
Right.
That's pretty damn good, right? And Hoffman's been lights out. He pitched the other day. Yes, he pitched on Sunday. So you look at it that way. Yeah, you look at guys that are playing above their previous level, like an Alec Bohm. I know his hitting streak ends yesterday, but even still, you look at those you look at those individuals. It's anywhere you look with this team right now, they are pretty strong in those individual areas, and that's what makes them so dangerous.
You can climb through all of the different ladders of the statistical categories across the pitching and the hitting, and you just see how good they are, and it sort of speaks to what you're talking about. You look at home runs per game. The Phillies are 3rd in home runs per game, so they can bop you at any point. You look at if you go to WAR, if you go to Fangraphs and look at the WAR, because I don't want to break down every single statistical category here, but just to kind of give you some idea, like their starting pitchers have the highest WAR in all of the sport right now. Yeah. The relievers, even though they have, I believe, the 24th best ERA, they have the 3rd most WAR. So like you look at that, and I know some people probably listen to this and go like, all right, cool, man. Like you don't win World Series on WAR, but like I would actually counter and say that right now that's probably a better indicator of what you actually have in your bullpen than what ERA suggests. And oh, by the way, here comes the Phillies bullpen, as I tweeted earlier this morning. I mean, their last 6 games, 21 third innings pitched, 20 hits, 3 earned runs, 4 walks, 23 strikeouts. 23 strikeouts to 4 walks, 1.33 ERA. They've actually shaved almost a full run off of their team ERA over the last 7 days out of the bullpen. So where's the weakness right now? Are they streaky hitters? Yes. Do they probably rely on the home run a bit too much? Yeah, I can go for that to a degree. I know that that's Howard Eskin's primary knock on this Phillies team, but they are very solid throughout. Like you said, they're not without flaws. They're not without some deficiencies, but overall, you're looking at a team that these guys are pretty damn good. What's the floor for this team right now, assuming that everybody stays reasonably healthy beyond this Trea Turner 6-week hamstring injury? 90 wins? What's the floor if things really go south for this team?
Yeah. I mean, when you have 25 wins now, if you don't get to 90,
like this group of guys, not even just that pace, not even just the numbers of it, but like this group with those numbers and that start,
yeah,
I just do not see how you fail. I just don't know how you don't get the 90 wins.
If they didn't win 90 games, Bob, at the end of the year, we're doing a show about
a disaster.
Yes, we're doing a show about how a team collapsed.
Yeah,
an unmitigated disaster. You're right. That's what that would be.
Happen in this city from time to time.
but you're right. You're absolutely right. But I don't look at this. I don't look at the makeup of this team and think that's in this DNA, right? No. Like it's just not there. The bigger question to me, Bob, is how special of a season are they putting together? Is this one that is going to, like, we joked about this last week, like, can this team win 100 games? And we were laughing about it. Ha, ha, ha. But the reality of it is now at this point, you look at it and go, they're 25-11, man. They only need to win 75 games the rest of the way. And I know that sounds like a lot, but it really isn't. This team they might be at a point now where we sit there and go, barring major injuries, this team could end up with the best regular season record in franchise history.
Well, they're playing 694 baseball right now. So I don't know that they're going to quite sustain that, but they are on pace right now to win 112 games.
Yeah.
So actually 112 and a half. So if you want to round up, I guess it's 113. But yeah, I mean, listen, it's really just kind of been crazy to watch. And in past seasons, you look at this past weekend, what happened with the Giants, and I could give you a narrative going into each one of those games why the Phillies were going to lose, even though they were the better team. We talked about it last week. Said, I think that the Phillies are probably going to split these 4 games against the Giants because, listen, San Francisco's okay. Phillies can't stay red hot forever.
Mm-hmm.
And Friday night it was, okay, yes, Aaron Nola is on the mound, but he's on extra rest. I think that there's concerns about his rhythm, like we saw with Zack Wheeler, like we've seen with some of the other guys in this rotation. They're coming back home off of a long road trip. The past few seasons, they've been terrible in that spot. They've been flat in their first game back. Maybe a loss here. Saturday night, you're like, okay, maybe tonight's the night. Even though it's Suarez, as good as he's been, you're like, maybe tonight's the night.
Yeah,
but
the bad weather,
things happen, and they come out and boom, it's 5-0 right away.
Yeah.
That game, though, going in, I was reasonably confident. Sunday, listen, Taijuan Walker, I thought pitched pretty well, and we should probably talk about him a little bit.
Yeah.
But certainly when you look at going against Logan Webb and you see the Phillies are an underdog at home, as red hot as they've been, advantage Giants there.
Yeah.
Nope. Phillies win that game. And then yesterday is like the quintessential letdown spot. You've got your guy going in a sleepy 405 start, going up against a kid who's a Giants number 7 prospect. He's not a total bum. He's a local kid. He's got the Lehigh connection. He had a lot of people there yesterday.
That was pretty cool.
Behind that third base dugout, man. Like, it was loud. That first inning when he got Real Muto and Harper.
Yeah.
I mean, there were more than at least 30, 40 people there for him.
From what I understand, I think it was over 100.
Yeah, I mean, you could tell it was
there.
audible. It was like not a stadium takeover or anything, but you knew those people were there. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, they're going to be flat as hell today. They're going to lose this game 2-1. Nope. You know, they just keep winning the games that in the past have just been such an easy letdown for them and for most teams across the sport. And they've just been immune to that here the past few weeks. We'll see what happens with the Toronto series. I could probably write you out a couple scenarios where I say, like, this might be the night.
Yeah.
Tonight might be the night. I got to say, the way that Christopher Sanchez is thrown lately and all, but we'll see. But I mean, the point being, they just continue to steamroll through this thing, and you start to wonder. You know, I've said it all along. Like, I think Atlanta wins the division. I still will pick Atlanta to win the division, but you right now are reaching a point where this has become crystallized a little bit. Like, you can now see beyond just projection how the Phillies win this division.
Yeah. It was, you know, and that was the thing. Like, beginning of the season when I picked the Phillies winning division, it was purely on projection. It was kind of like, well, I think that, you know, this could happen. You know, and more so, it was, to be honest with you, Bob, it was me looking at Atlanta and thinking, as even though they're really, really talented, how hard it would be for them to replicate what they did a year ago offensively, because it was just everybody was having such a great year for them offensively. It's really going to be hard for them to do that, and so far that's proven to be true. And you look at guys like Acuna and Olsen, who are really just not, they're underperforming. Austin Riley, they're not performing to the level they were a year ago. So that was
it's really crazy, right? Like, just to like kind of back that up, but like, they're third in baseball in runs per game. But like, Matt Olson, like, have you seen Matt Olson's numbers this season?
They're awful. Yeah,
he's hitting $197 with a 676 OPS. He's got 3 home runs right now, a year after he hit 54.
Yeah.
Like, and then Acuna is like, his numbers are okay, but they're not Ronald Acuna numbers. They're not MVP numbers.
Right.
And like, and he'll get going, right? But how the hell is Atlanta scoring 5+ runs per game right now with Acuna, Olsen, and Riley, who hasn't really been great?
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. And that, so like, that to me was more why I picked the Phillies, because I kind of thought that there would be a little bit of an offensive regression for the Braves. Plus, I don't love their pitching. And I thought the Phillies would kind of be what they were last year, maybe a slightly better. and that was where I made the difference. I made up the difference. I did not see the Phillies coming out and just crushing people. I didn't see that. I didn't see them coming out and having every start by a starting pitcher be either fantastic or at worst be passable. Like you talked about the Nola game on Friday when he had all that extra rest, and he had a 46 pitch second inning, and he only pitched 4 innings. But guess what? He only got 2 runs, right? Like last year, that game by Aaron Nola, he's given up 6 runs, and then you probably end up losing that game 6-4 or something like that, or 7-5 or whatever, right? But he found a way to only give up 2 runs. So even when they have less than stellar starts, they're still limiting the damage enough to keep them in games. And that is a difference from last season for sure. So yeah, I mean, I almost think like we're nearing the point, and you said you haven't changed your opinion yet. And I understand why. There's a long season still ahead, but we are getting closer to a point where you go, all right, the expectation has changed. It's no longer just compete with the Braves. The expectation is to beat the Braves and win this division.
Yeah, and Braves are coming off a stretch, West Coast trip to Seattle and Los Angeles, which is pretty tough.
Yeah.
They go 1-5. They get absolutely clobbered by the Dodgers over the weekend. They compete Friday night, lose in extra innings, and then the final 2 games, not so much. I believe they were outscored in that series 20-6. It's easy to kind of kick the Braves when they're coming off of a tough road trip, and we'll see how they respond. But I also don't think Atlanta was as good or is as good as they played the first few weeks of the season, where they were just winning and winning and winning. Like, I don't think that was a sustainable pace for them either. So I look up and I see where the Braves are at this morning, and I go, yeah, that's about what the Braves ought to be. And the Phillies might be a game or two ahead of where they might really should be, based on you don't expect teams to win at this pace. Now, listen, there are a few things that just, again, yesterday, they just jump out at you. And like it all starts with Zack Wheeler. Like, I actually thought when you go back to his start in Cincinnati a couple times ago, I guess about 2 weeks ago now, I didn't think he was all that sharp in that start. He had some walks, he ran some deep counts. He wasn't totally efficient in that game, but the Reds didn't do anything against him. They couldn't hit him, right? And he gets deep enough into the game, no runs. Last week against the Angels, I didn't think he was very sharp at all. He threw 106 pitches in 5 innings, but he only allows 1 earned run. Still does a good job. Phillies go on to win the game. But yesterday, normal rest, he's back to his old self. He goes 7 innings, and he gives up 4 hits. He strikes out 10 plus for the 3rd time this season. His last 4 starts, 1 earned run, 11 hits, 8 walks, 33 strikeouts, 25 1/3 innings, a .36 ERA, 0.75 WHIP. He's going to win the Cy Young, right?
Well, he should win the Cy Young. I mean, he's
like, it's his time, right? He's been dancing around this thing now for a while. And I just feel like he gets it this time.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, his biggest challenge may come from within, right? I mean, I can't expect Ranger Suarez to continue to be as dominant as he's been. He's got to have a somewhat of a regression, even a slight one, I would think. But you don't look at Zack Wheeler and think regression. You look at the way Zack Wheeler's pitching and think, this is how this guy is going to throw every time out, and he's just going to be, he's going to shove, and teams are going to be unable to catch up to him. And so, that was probably the most impressive performance yesterday. Because it's, again, like you said, there was a chance that, and I think he pitched like there was a chance that the team may not be so opportunistic. Early in the game, Mason Black pitched well, and the Phillies struggled against him.
He was good for 4 innings. He gives up the run on the Merrifield single in the 4th, but you're like, okay, hey, that's 4 innings, 1-run ball against this lineup right now, the way they're going, especially as good as the Phillies are early in games, right? Like, they've been so good at getting on teams early.
And so like you were thinking Wheeler's going to have to win this game, and he was that good. I mean, eventually they get to the kid, and they put up 6 runs, but Wheeler was like, all right, this isn't going to. I'm not going to let this game get away from us. Like, so that's why I was really impressed by him yesterday, maybe more than anybody else, because it was, like you said, coming off of 2 not great starts.
Not great. Like, that's the bar, though, that we're talking about. He gave up 1 total earned run in those 2 starts. And we're like, it wasn't great. Like, that is really that is where the bar has been set for this guy. And oh, by the way, plus 225 to win the NL Cy Young at DraftKings this morning. Tyler Glasnow is second, plus 500. I mean, he is the prohibitive favorite to win the NL Cy Young Award right now on May 7th.
Yeah.
For whatever that's worth.
And it's a good bet. I think it's a good bet. I think it's a good, if you're a gambling person, I think that's a really good investment, to be honest with you. So,
yeah. So, I mean, he was super impressive, and he did get some help early in the game. And this takes us to a conversation that I think is really important. Bryson Stott goes to his left, makes a diving stop up the middle, starts a 6-4-3 double play. Ball gets through. It's 1-0 Giants right away, and maybe the game takes a different turn. Bryson Stott had not played shortstop since Game 6 of the 2022 World Series. He played 83 games there his rookie season in 2022. Made 7 errors in 83 games, 975 fielding percentage. What do you think here? Like, with Trea Turner out, how do you sort of expect the Phillies to navigate the middle infield? Was yesterday a preview of what we're going to see more often than not? Does Edmundo Sosa get the bulk starts here at shortstop? Like, how do you see this unfolding?
I think what you saw yesterday will be the majority of the time. I think Sosa's still going to get sprinkled in there somewhat, maybe even a little bit more than he would be on a normal basis, right? I mean, he normally is playing 1 to 2 games a week. Maybe he's up to 2 to 3 at this point. And I think that you could do some things, now that you can probably find other ways to get him in the lineup too. Like, for example, now that Bohm's hitting streak is over, maybe you give him tomorrow off, because he's still got that. You can still see him stretching that hip out a little
grabby. He looked a little grabby late yesterday. I almost wonder if he's out of the lineup tonight. Maybe you give him a day.
I thought maybe he would play tonight and be out tomorrow, so it's 2 days off in a row.
Yeah,
that's what I thought.
Yeah,
right?
Maybe you do that
because it's a day game following a night game kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
I think maybe Sosa gets into the game tomorrow. And you could play Sosa with Stott and Merrifield. So, right.
Yeah.
But I think that ultimately that's what you're seeing is going to be a majority of the time Bryson Stott at shortstop with Merrifield at second. And Merrifield has now, a 7-game hitting streak in the game?
Yeah, his last 7 games, 7-game hitting streak. He is 10 for his last 24, hitting .417 with a .462 on base percentage.
That's exactly what you want from this guy.
What you expected, maybe not 417, but yeah.
I mean, no, but that was the idea when he plays, and he wasn't going to be an everyday player, but when he plays, he's going to be productive. And I think that, he's going to have to be a little bit more of an everyday guy or mostly everyday guy while Turner's out. So you don't expect to, get hit every time out, but more often than not, this is the kind of guy that you're expecting. And that's another difference from last year, Bob, is the depth on this team, right?
Oh, imagine if this happened last year. I mean, you'd be married to Sosa 5 times a week, 6 times a week, or you'd be going to Josh Harrison right now, who was done.
Right. Exactly. Well, they were already married to Sosa last year. This was right when Harper came back last year.
Yeah.
So, but Harper still had a DH at that point. Yeah. Right. So you probably would have had to have Josh Harrison in the lineup at this point last year. So there's a big difference right there. And then also, of course, with the starting pitching, having a 6th starter. Last year, they only had 4. Yeah. It was last year this time that we were going to Dylan Covey, right? to be your guy, Dylan Covey, Britton Covey, Dylan Covey. I had to get him right. Dylan Covey. At this time last year. And then Christopher Sanchez was like, well, we'll give him a shot. And then he ended up sticking after that, right? So the depth is there. No matter where you look, they have guys that they can bring in case of injury and make it happen. So this goes back to our initial point.
And then you see Whit Merrifield comes up and he gets the run-scoring single, gets the scoring starter for the Phillies in the 4th inning yesterday as well. So it was kind of nice to see that combination sort of hit the ground running. I am curious what you think happens when Trea Turner comes back. I think there's another conversation you want to have around this as well. But when Trea Turner comes back, you would expect that he just simply slots back in at shortstop, right? And Bryson Stott goes back to second base. I know that there's been some beating of the drum to have Stott play shortstop every day and make the move here and flip these two guys. Like, is this an opportunity to just sort of jump off and do that? Or do you think they just keep it as is once Turner's back?
I would say more than likely it's going to go back to the way it was and Turner back at short and Stott back at second. And that's probably the right move. But I will say this, if Stott plays a bulk of these games at shortstop, and I think he's going to, and he plays it really well, then there's a conversation. Not saying that it's the right move, but there is a conversation. Just because Turner has always been better as a second baseman than as a shortstop.
Right.
And we've seen the one thing that, it's hard to criticize him because he got off to such a great start. But the one thing is how many times he,
the defense is not
right?
very good, right?
It's not great, right? So then I think, it is maybe worth a conversation at that point. But because I think
I'd be surprised if it happens, but I you know what happens? Like, they're winning games and everything is working well and he's hitting. So I'm willing to forgive the defensive issues a little bit more so than I otherwise would be. So, like, already with him just gone for a few days, I'm like, oh, he wasn't that bad at shortstop, was he? And then you really think about it, you're like, no, he was. He's been pretty bad defensively. But, here's the thing. I mean, like, Bryson Stott is not Ozzie Smith at shortstop either. Yeah, I know it was his rookie year, but in those 83 games that he played at shortstop, he had -5 defensive run save, according to Fangraphs. And, like, you go, okay, what defensive run save? Like, there's a little bit of a subjective, feel about that. But it's not like you're getting a Gold Glover over at shortstop. I just don't know if they would mess with the flow of the season, the way that this tandem works. Like, I think they would probably just go back to where it was, but it is something worth keeping an eye on. Great play though, at the beginning of the game, and then he made that running catch to go track down that floater into left field late. I know he had the throwing error mixed in there, but like Rob said after the game, that wasn't really a product of him playing shortstop. He just made a poor throw. So, I thought he did a nice job first game out there.
Yeah, for sure. But I think this brings up a different conversation that involves Turner. Is it possible, Bob, that his injury here, and I know it's only been 3 games, but is it possible that his injury here ended up jump-starting a few guys in this lineup? Because they felt like they had to maybe pick up some slack. And I look at these 3 games. Just start right off the top with JT Realmuto.
Yeah,
moving into that number 2 spot. And how much better he's been in these past 3 games than he had been the first 33. Right? Bryce Harper starting to now become Bryce Harper in the last 3 games. Bryson Stott I think his at bats started to look a little bit better just before Turner got hurt, but that they've continued now with Turner out, and even your boy Nick Castellanos.
My boy.
I know that you like to criticize him a little bit.
Hey, listen. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm out of turn there, man.
No, you're not.
And I like Nick Castellanos. I'm pro Castellanos. I'm not pro Castellanos through 36 games this season, but I'm pro Castellanos.
Yeah, but even Nick, the game he had yesterday was a more what you were hoping to see out of him.
On base 4 times. I wrote yesterday he's got a 529 OPS this morning, his highest OPS since March 31st.
Yeah,
things are pointing up.
Things are pointing up, right? No, but I'm saying, like, you look at it and say, just in these 3 games, those guys who were underperforming, I would say, from what your expectation is, or at least what their own individual expectation is especially with a guy like Harper. Just in the past 3 days, they've all been better. And it's almost like that. I wonder if that losing Turner, who had been so important to the lineup, kind of kickstarted that.
I think it's fair to wonder. You pointed out that Bryson Stott has swung the bat a little bit better here these past few games. JT Realmuto over the last 3 is 6 for his last 12. So he's gotten things going. Then obviously Bryce Harper, back-to-back home runs, 3-run shots, and they were sort of the difference makers both Sunday and Monday. It's so funny looking at Bryce Harper specifically, because if there is a guy that when Trea Turner goes down and says, all right, it's time now. I don't know that JT Realmuto gets in the box and says, it's time for me to be JT Realmuto. Maybe, but certainly he's done a nice job. But I think Bryce Harper is the one guy that sees that and gets that news and says, okay, no more fucking around. Like, I really honestly think that's how that guy operates. I really do. You're like, what human being really thinks like that? And I think Bryce Harper does. Like, I really think that I think Turner goes down and he says, my turn. I got you. Don't worry about it. And I truly believe that. And these past couple games, it certainly appears that way.
Yeah.
You know, for all we've talked about with Bryce Harper, like, he hasn't really gotten going yet. He's been okay. You know, you look at his projections, he's on pace for 36 homers, 108 runs batted in, and we're underwhelmed by his start. He's going to hit 40 home runs.
Yes, he is.
He's going to hit 275, 280 plus.
And I wouldn't be surprised, Bob, if by the end of the season he's not in the MVP conversation.
Yeah, I
you know what I'm saying?
You know what I said before the season? I thought that he was going to win the MVP. Now, you got to overcome Betts and Ohtani to do that, but maybe he doesn't win it, maybe he does, but I think he is in that conversation for sure.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I mean, no one has talked about him in that vein so far to start the year. But if this is the thing that vaults him forward, and all of a sudden we start to get the best of Bryce Harper now from this point forward, yeah, he's going to be in that. He's going to be amongst those top 3 or 4 guys for that award at the end of the year.
You got a guy hitting 243, but he has a 371 on base percentage right now. I mean, it's ridiculous. In fact, going into yesterday's game, he led baseball in walk rate. So I think he was like 5th or 6th overall in number of walks, but he had missed a few games. Just in terms of pure walk rate, though, he was tops in baseball.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Speaking of walk rate, I don't know, and I don't know if you have the team stats. I'm just thinking about this off the top of my head, just because of how many walks they've had. I got to think that they're amongst the major league lead or National League lead rather in walk rate, because
they are. They're tied with Chicago 4th overall across all of baseball, 9.9%. Pittsburgh, believe it or not, that's actually hard to believe. The Yankees and the Dodgers are the 3 teams ahead of them.
Yeah. And to think that they weren't at the beginning of the season, they weren't walking. So that's what so again, it's like, oh man, like this is of late, you know. I think I'm just looking at the counting stats, and Harper and Schwarber have each walked 24 times already. And Stott and Bohm have each walked 15 times, and even Castellanos has walked 12 times. I mean, they have 5 guys with double-digit walks already this season. So that's part of it. They're becoming a little bit more selective at the plate in the sense of not necessarily from a chase rate perspective, but forcing other teams to pitch to them and maybe get better pitches to hit. And I think that says a lot for them.
You're right on. I mean, listen, man, they're 4th in slugging right now overall. They're 2nd in on-base percentage behind only the Dodgers. They're 5th in batting average, 256 team average. And the other part about it is that they're not striking out a ton relative to the rest of the game. They're 15th in strikeout percentage right now, 22.9%.
Which is amazing, Bob, considering
that they struck out 18 times last Wednesday,
and struck out 17 times on Sunday. So you had 2 games in the past week where they've struck out 17 and 18 times, and they're still middle of the pack, which is crazy. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's, I think, kind of illustrates the earlier point of just how complete this team has been. You say, like, where's the hole? Oh, it's top 5 this, top 5 that on the offensive side. Then you dig into the starting pitching numbers, and they're 1-2 across the board. They have the leader in the clubhouse for the NL Cy Young Award. They have another guy in Ranger Suarez who's nipping on the heels. They have another guy in Aaron Nola that is probably going to finish in the top 7 or 8. Like,
yeah.
I got to tell you right now, it's hard. It's hard for me doing this show because I'm better when I'm angry.
Yeah. Yeah, but
They're making it hard on me right now.
that's okay. That's okay. One of the things that we always like to talk about on our Flyers podcast, Know the Goalie, is how fans should feel, right? Like should you be excited? Should you be upset? Should you be angry? Like whatever, blah blah blah. Like I look at this right now and say, you're in for a fun summer. Like sit back and enjoy this. Think back. Remember 1993. Remember what that was like. I mean, yeah, that one kind of came out of the blue a little bit. You weren't expecting that team to be that good, and then all of a sudden they were that good.
Yeah.
And then what that season was like, right? And that run was like, because that we talked about this briefly. I don't know if it was the last podcast or two podcasts ago about how you remember regular season games and outcomes from that team, right? So think back to that, and that's what you're looking for. That's what you're going to have this summer with this team. Very likely, you're going to have games where you're going to have those regular season memories that are different than your postseason. Everybody always remembers the postseason games, right? But you're going to have regular season memories. Enjoy that, man. Like that's what this is going to be. This is going to be fun, regardless of what the outcome is at the end. Between today, May 7th, and October 1st, when the playoffs are, getting ready to start, it's going to be a fun few months watching baseball in Philadelphia.
It is. I want to just touch on a couple other quick things before we get out of here.
Yeah.
Certainly much has been made about the current National League East standings because the Phillies hold a 3-game lead over the Braves. And I know it's only 1 game in the loss column, but I'll lean on the 3 games. Look at the third place team right now. The Washington Nationals.
Yeah.
17-17. They had a horrible start. They shook that off. They're 7-3 in their last 10. They played the Blue Jays really tough all weekend. Like, do you kind of look at them and say, like, they could have a little like wild card fight to them, or are we maybe a little too early on to say that? A couple decent bullpen arms. CJ Abrams has been good. Like, I don't know, man.
Yeah, I mean, they're certainly intriguing. Look, we said at the beginning of the season, like we thought that this division was going to be a little bit better than it was a season ago. Maybe the Marlins ended up being worse than we thought, but yeah, I mean, they're an interesting team. I'm not sure that there's just enough there yet to be a playoff contender. But can they be tough out? Like, can they be? They tough
win like 75. If I give you over under 75 wins right now, they get there.
I think that's about right. Maybe I'll even probably go. I'll even probably go a little bit over. I think that they're probably like a 77, 78 win.
So do I.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not there yet. Like I posed the question. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm intrigued by them. Like I have an eye on the Nationals on a nightly basis. I've been pretty impressed with them.
Yeah, and if you look at it was funny because we always try and look ahead at the Phillies' upcoming schedule when we do these shows and say, "Oh, what's coming?" I got the 2 games with Toronto, and then they go out on the road again for a 5-game trip. Miami, okay, they should crush them, and then you got a home with the Mets, 2 in New York, 2 here, but then the Nationals come here and Texas right after them. I think that's the next toughest stretch for the Phillies. When you look at consecutive series that are going to be hard, trying to find those, where are the tough matchups. I think that you include Washington in that, even though it's a homestand, even though it's part of a homestand with Washington and Texas. I think that's the next time you get there and go, okay, they're going to play some decent teams in a row. And that's Washington. You're including Washington in that conversation. So yeah, I mean, that kind of, answers the question that you're asking is, are they a team to watch? And they are in that regard.
Yeah, no, for sure. The only other thing I kind of wanted to just briefly touch on is this upcoming 2-game series with the Toronto Blue Jays, a team that I just continued to be dumbfounded by. I expected more out of the Blue Jays last season. I know that turned out like they had a functional year and all that, but I just, what am I missing with this team? And like they come in tonight with Jose Barrios and like, he's about as good as it gets in the American League. So tough matchup tonight. Do you have any like thoughts or input about what the Blue Jays are?
Well, I'm a little surprised by them. I don't understand why they are not very good offensively. Like that's the thing that really stands out to me. Like nobody's hitting on that team. I mean, Justin Turner's been fine as their DH, but he's 39 years old, right? I don't know how long that lasts. They have where's Vladdy Guerrero? What happened to him?
Yeah. I mean, dude, they are 23rd in batting average or as a team, 226.
Yeah.
Slugging percentage, they're 23rd at 362. OPS
Yeah.
670, 20th overall. Like I thought that this was like a top 10, top 12
Well,
offense.
I mean, here's I just pulled up their team stats. Guerrero's hitting 239 with a 711 OPS. Bo Bichette, who really last couple years has been one of the better shortstops in the game, hitting 195 with a 254 on base percentage, 530 OPS. Okay. George Springer hitting 205, 303 slugging, 582 OPS. Like there are guys just missing, flat out missing that you ain't expected to be like exponentially better than what they are. And so like that's to me why they're in last place currently in the American League East. It's not necessarily about their pitching, but like you said, Barrios has been great. You say Kikuchi's been really good for them. Gosman's been Gosman, right? I mean, they've had their guys and their bullpen's not terrible. I mean, Romano's maybe maybe a little bit behind. I think he had an injury, if I remember correctly. But and so maybe their bullpen hasn't been as good, but it's really not about the pitching. It's about their hitting not being there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at Barrios tonight, who they'll see, and he has yet to surrender more than 2 earned runs in any of his starts this season, which is pretty impressive. He's taken the ball now 7 times. His worst outing was 5 innings, 2 earned runs against the Royals on April 25th. He has a 1.44 ERA, 31 strikeouts in 43 and 2/3 innings, and a 101 whip. So the Phillies are going to be in for one tonight, and they're going to have to get more out of Christopher Sanchez than they've gotten here the past few times out. And that changeup better be working tonight, or you might see a couple of these guys that you just talked about who are not swinging the bats all that well right now, maybe break out for an evening. So look, I mean,
yeah, but you know what? I wonder just how long of a leash Sanchez has tonight. They didn't pitch Turnbull over the weekend, even though he was available out of the pen. And I just wonder how long what kind of a leash he has before they would turn it over to Spencer Turnbull.
Yeah. Yeah. I almost have to take a step back when you see a team that's playing this well, and every night, and I talked about this last week, how you get geared up for every game. Like every game feels important. Every game has a little bit of juice to it, even on May 7th. Like this is not a playoff game. They don't have to throw the kitchen sink at the Toronto Blue Jays tonight to win their 7th in a row. It's not the end of the world if they don't, but like that's kind of where I'm at now. I'm like looking ahead and I'm like, okay, what do we got tonight? Like, what are they in for? And then they get Bassett, I believe, tomorrow, who's been not great for them. So we'll see against Nola. So should be interesting here. I don't know if you have anything else on the Phillies front, but if not, we could jump to one last thing.
Well, I know I do have a couple things real quick. Okay. It's just to get a couple comments real fast, because one that you mentioned earlier that we had to talk about, we never got to, was the Taiwan Walker. Yes. But I think it's worth pointing out that he had so in 2 games he was good through 6 innings. Yeah. And then in the 7th inning, he gave up home runs both out in San Diego and then at home on Sunday night. But otherwise, he's been okay. And if he's going to be your quote unquote number 5 starter, those are totally fine outings if you get him out after 6 innings.
Yeah, I'll say the same thing I said after his first start against the Padres, which was if the thing was cut after 6 innings, you feel really good about what he gave you. And I don't know if they just simply feel like he is a guy that they expect to be able to take down that 7th inning to pitch deeper into games, and that's why they're having him do it. They feel that he's built up enough to do it. I do think it's a little bit strange that working back from an injury, that they're giving him that 7th up down. Like they always like to point to the up downs, right? It's not always about the pitches, it's about the up downs. Like I feel like it's a pretty aggressive approach for a guy that's working his way back to some degree.
Yeah.
But again, I think I alluded to this last week. It's just, to me, there's a little bit of an evaluation aspect to this. Like, can you get us deeper into games? Because like right now, if you compare Christopher Sanchez and Taijuan Walker, I would say that the advantage for Taijuan Walker, other than the contract, is when you give him the ball, you sort of expect him to chew up 6 or 7 innings.
Right.
When you give Christopher Sanchez the ball, you expect 5 innings. If you get anything beyond that, you're happy with it, but you're expecting 5 innings out of Christopher Sanchez. And you say, well, yeah, but like if they're more effective, then great. Well, yeah, okay, but is Christopher Sanchez the guy that he was the first 4 or 5 times out, or is he the guy that we've seen the last 2 times out? Like,
Right.
which guy is he? Because that's a big difference. And over the course of 32 starts, you say, well, what's the difference between 5 and 6 innings? Well, 32 innings that the bullpen doesn't have to chew up if you're getting 1 extra inning out of a guy every time through the rotation. And if you go through it 2 innings more, it's 60 plus innings over the course of a season. Like, it adds up. So I really do think, even though Turnbull is the odd guy out, I adopt your belief that really this is about Christopher Sanchez versus Taijuan Walker in the short term, because I do believe eventually this is going to get to a place where Spencer Turnbull is back in this rotation.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a very astute observation by you to get on my bandwagon. Good work with you.
Yeah.
The only other Phillies thing I wanted to get to, and I briefly mentioned it earlier, but I want to ask it in this vein. I mean, the bullpen guys, Matt Strahm and Jeff Hoffman especially, have been so good in their roles. They've combined to allow just four earned runs in 30 innings between Hoffman and Strahm. Okay, 46 strikeouts in those 30 innings to just 6 walks, the two of them together. And there's no question they've been sensational. We don't have to sit here and use all those great words. The question is, can they sustain this? Are these guys good enough? Are they the dudes in the bullpen to carry this team forward and just say, this is kind of like the old Kansas City Royal bullpen mentality where starters get us through 6. We have a guy that can get you in 7, a guy that can get you in 8, and then we turn it over to the closer in 9.
You know how sometimes when you watch sports, you see athletes and they look scared, or you can see the lack of confidence that they exude.
Yeah.
With Jeff Hoffman, the best way I can describe him is when you see him take the mound, he looks like, and I mean this in all sincerity, and I apologize in advance for the vulgarity, but he looks like a guy who wants to rip your fucking head off when he's on the mound. Like, he is not scared of anything. You want to bring him in with runners on base? Okay, I'll get you out of it. I'm going to go right at guys. I'm going to attack. I'm confident in my game. I've worked my ass off to get to this point. People counted me out. They never thought in a million years I'd be this guy. I feel like he pitches with that vibe and that like feeling to him at all times. He's ultra alpha, like super aggressive. I mean, dude's a bulldog. He really is. I do think it's sustainable. I think we saw what he could be at the end of last season. The fact that he's been able to carry that over. If we talked in the beginning of March, back in mid-February, be like, hey, questions about this Phillies team, things that concern you. And one of the things that would have concerned me is, can Jeff Hoffman replicate what he was a year ago? And not only is he replicating it right now, he's actually better than that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned that kind of attitude. We may have mentioned this on this show before, and if I did, so be it. But then maybe we have some new listeners who don't know. He's got on his glove stitched the letters FAH, and I kind of remember thinking last year when I saw that it must be somebody in his family, right? The initials somebody in his family. H is last name's Hoffman, right? It must be what it is. It's a tribute to somebody, and you ask him, what does it stand for? Fuck all hitters. That's what it stands for.
Yeah. I mean,
you gotta love that dude's attitude, right?
That is the mentality that he brings. And as far as Matt Strahm goes, I mean, listen, I don't think he's quite as aggressive. I don't know that there's as much animosity in his game, but he's a guy too that I think is a little bit more like even keel. He doesn't get revved up quite as much, but you see, he's like, he can be animated out there at times too. He gets upset. with himself if he makes a mistake. But he's another guy that he attacks. He's super confident. He's in a good rhythm right now. And is he going to remain as good as he's been since after that opening day blow up? Probably not. But I feel about as good between Hoffman and Strom. I feel better about those two guys right now in this moment than I do about any other guy out of that bullpen, including Jose Alvarado, who, to be honest with you, though he's been effective,
his velocity was down on Sunday,
and doesn't look quite himself at the moment.
Yeah, and we asked Rob about that, and he said, yeah, we got to be a little bit careful. We used him five times in 8 days, and we got to be smart about it. And when I saw that, and I was like, there's no way he's pitching yesterday, and I would expect he doesn't pitch tonight either.
What was he at on the gun Sunday night? Was he like 96, 97?
I think it was 96, 97. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, he was just a little bit down. Yeah. So I would think that he gets a couple days off. Maybe he'll be available tomorrow, and then there's another off day after that, right? So, but I would expect that he's not available tonight either. That's my guess. So
I have a bunch of talking points for later in this week, but I will save them. I actually have some. Especially if they're winning, if like they win a couple more games, I'm not going to do this let's slobber all over the Phillies thing again on Friday. I just can't do it. So I do have some. If you're listening, you're like, oh man, like, are they just going to keep doing this if they win? I actually have some projection and speculations and things like that that we can look at, some hypotheticals for mid-season on Friday.
That's good. That's good.
All right, what do you got for me?
One last thing is actually still going to be somewhat Phillies related, but it's from a national scale. I don't know if you pay attention to power rankings, and I don't put a lot of stock into them, but they come out, everybody puts them out every week, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And coming into the season, the Phillies were, I usually look at like The Athletic and I look at ESPN. I think those are the two that you really look at. And ESPN's actually technically haven't come out yet. They usually come out midweek. So they're not quite out yet for this week. So I'm going to slightly absolve them yet. But the Athletics came out today. Beginning of the year, for both, Phillies were at number 6, which was probably, from a national perspective, I can understand where they're at. They've done what they've done, gotten off to this 25-11 start, right? And they're still in the Athletic, just number 5. How can you have the kind of start that the Phillies have had this year and still just be the 5th best team according to the Athletic? And ESPN, for their work, they put out a story today, or a ranking today, that was how all 30 major league teams have met or not met their expectations so far. And again, they have the Phillies at number 5 in this expectation. So this isn't their official power rankings, but this is meeting expectations. They're at number 5 and says so far hanging with the top tier. Just hanging with them. They're hanging in there. They're hanging in there. They're still expected to be MLB's best wild card team, but they're hanging with the top tier. At what point? And I feel like this happens every year in baseball, and this even goes back to when you had the great run from 07 to 11. I just feel like the Phillies, for whatever reason, and I don't know why, are always little brother in from a national perspective. That everybody, there's always the focus on the big market teams, the LAs and the New Yorks. I get it, and then wherever the star players are playing, and then the Phillies are always just kind of they're fun, they're good, they're right kind of the next tier down. They're never included in that top tier and at the national level, and I don't understand why. I don't get it.
It's an interesting question. I'm looking at the Athletics power rankings this morning, and okay, the Dodgers, I would concede that I believe in this moment that the Dodgers are better than the Phillies. I know the standings don't say that. I just think that when you're LA and you get this big series against the Braves and you crush them, that it's not unreasonable to say the Dodgers are number one. Plus, there's a pedigree there, a regular season pedigree that they're going to win 115 games or whatever they're going to win, right? Like they could win 105, 107 games. Like I think that you feel pretty comfortable knowing that the Dodgers are going to get there. Are the Phillies? I don't know that. So, like, if you want to tell me right now that you're doing your power rankings, you have the Dodgers ahead of the Phillies. I can't dispute that. I can't. They go Braves too. And I'm telling you that I still think Atlanta's going to win the division. So it would be hypocritical of me to sit here and complain that they're number 2 in the power rankings. But I would say, what have you seen other than historical reference, right? Like if you're just in a vacuum looking at the 2024 baseball season, that right now to this point makes you think that Atlanta is better than this Phillies team. Like if you really go piece by piece, bullpen to bullpen, rotation to rotation, especially. I know Atlanta's lineup, you got to give them the nod. They've outproduced the Phillies to this point, even with a couple guys slumping. I don't think that's an egregious decision, but I don't know. I'm not like utterly convinced that Atlanta's ahead of the Phillies, and on merit, they probably shouldn't be at this point.
Right.
I love the Orioles. Like I think, I picked them to win the AL. They've been great. Their schedule's been pretty difficult. I don't really have a problem with the Orioles either. The one that gets me is the Yankees. Like these fucking national writers, they just cannot help themselves. Like the Yankees have played good ball. Like they're all right. Like they just beat up Detroit a little bit at home, who's been playing pretty well this past weekend.
Yeah.
But like, come on, man. Like the Phillies are better than the Yankees right now.
Yeah.
They are.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't think that this is the greatest injustice I've ever seen in sports journalism, but I'd probably rank the Phillies third. I'd probably go Dodgers, Orioles, Phillies right now.
Yeah, I probably have the Phillies. I would put the Phillies ahead of the Orioles, and only because I still think that the Orioles are great, and I picked them to go to the World Series too, and but I still think that there's a little bit of youth there.
Yeah.
Right, and I think that ultimately, we'll see how youth plays later in the year when the going gets, when things start to really ramp up. And so, I do it with a little bit of projection in mind too. I was like, what have I seen? When I'm looking at the team, what have I seen? And what do I think is coming? And so that's why I would probably still put the Phillies ahead of the Orioles. I'm good with the Dodgers one.
I'll tell you what's interesting with the Orioles, man. Like they got back Means, who was pretty good his first start back. I think he went 7 scoreless, and then they got back Bradish, who's awesome.
Yeah.
And Rodriguez is working his way back. I mean, like if he comes back, if Grayson Rodriguez comes back and is Grayson Rodriguez and what he can be, that Orioles team, man, like look out. And you pair him up with Burns, who's been really good. They've even had like their guys, their fill-ins, like the Suarez guy, like he's been pretty good.
Cole Irvin,
who, like that's one where I'm like, it's kind of just a matter of time. But I'll tell you what, the biggest problem for the Baltimore Orioles right now at 23-11 is guess who? Craig Kimbrell. I mean, he's been a nightmare for them.
Yeah.
He blew 2 games last week and almost blew a third. But he was taken out of the game against Cincinnati on Saturday night before he could totally implode. So they have a big time Craig Kimbrell situation on their hands right now.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see. Like I said, I think that there's a little bit of youth there that I wonder how that plays come September, October. We saw it last year. They were great last year in the regular season.
So you don't know if they're in their learn their lesson year here? Like I thought maybe last year was the learning year, and then this year is the we.
Yeah, it could well be. And look, I picked them to go to the World Series, right? Yeah. But that's only because I don't think the American League is as strong as the National League is this year, and I think that they're the best team, and they're going to ultimately come out of it. So yeah, I mean, I do, but I do think that there's going to be some challenges for them in the regular season getting there. Like I think that they like the learn year, maybe they learn to not go 100 miles an hour nonstop for 6 months. Maybe that's part of it. And so that's why I think that there's going to be a slight regression in season.
Yeah.
That's why I would still put the Phillies ahead of them. But I would go Dodgers. I would go Dodgers, Phillies, Orioles, 1, 2, 3 at this point. And Braves 4 is what I would do. Based off of the way they've played. That's how I would go.
All right. Well, listen, we'll be back on Friday morning. We'll see. What do we got? We got 2 games with the Blue Jays, right? We got day off Thursday.
Correct.
Is that correct? All right. Very good. So we'll be back here after this quick little 2-game set with Toronto. Phillies looking to keep it going, looking to remain in first place. It's been a lot of fun. And hopefully, if you've been listening to us all along, you continue to do so. And I think we're getting some new listeners here over the past few weeks, obviously, with the team doing really well. So thanks for tuning in. You can follow Anthony online on X at AntSamPhilly. You can check him out on Crossing Broad. You can also check me out at Bob_Wankel on X. And you can check out my free newsletters delivered Mondays and Fridays every week at redoctoberphilly.com. Thanks, and we will talk to you soon.